All right, first let's review what we already know about flowers. The first thing I want to go over is the parts of the flower that are neither male nor female. So let's look at those first. First of all, we have the petals, right? The sepals that protect the petals when the bud is closed, and the receptacle which the whole flower sits on. Okay, next I want to take a look at the male of our flower. So our male part of our flower is located right here, okay, and it is called the stamen is made up of two different parts. The top part here is the anther. The anther is where you will find pollen. Pollen is produced in the anther. The other part is the stalk that holds up the anther, this part right here, and that's called the filament. Next, let's take a look at the female reproductive parts of a plant. And those we find right here in the center of the plant. The whole unit here is called pistil. The pistil is made up of basically three parts. The first part we have is the top part called the stigma. That's the sticky or feathery part that will catch pollen. This long tube that we have right here, right, that long tube is the style. Okay, and this bottom piece that we have right here, this bulb-like piece, is the ovary. Okay, and the ovary contains the ovules, which are our female sex cells for the flower. Now let's talk about the process of pollination and how that works. As you can see, we have a bunch of pollen on the tips of our anther up here. And we have a pollinator in our little bee who flies around. He's looking for nectar, and he knows he can find some nectar in this flower, but as he's looking for that nectar, he ends up traveling and walking all over these anthers. And as he's walking all over the anthers, he begins to pick up pieces of that pollen that is on the plant. And then when he flies away, he has all of that pollen stuck to him, stuck to his legs, stuck to his pollen basket. So as our bee goes flying around from place to place, he eventually ends up finding a new plant, a new flower, and as he's walking around that flower looking for its nectar, he may end up stepping on that stigma, which is sticky or feathery sometimes, and what happens when he does that is that some of the pollen that he's carrying around on his legs and in his pollen basket may end up getting caught on the stigma of that plant. Now let's take a closer look at what happens to that pollen after it lands on the stigma. So we have our pistil here, right? We have our stigma. We have the style. And we have down here the ovary, which contains the ovules. And what happens once our pollen has landed on the stigma is that each grain of pollen begins to make a tube that follows all the way down the style into the ovary and up inside it, meeting up with the ovule and fertilizing the egg that's in there.